Good morning. Welcome to Studio Time with Deb, the online version. Today we're going to be talking about buffs, burrs, and bits. And I did this because I wanted a really simple topic. I thought it would be really easy. I would just go over a few things. The reason that it started is because Rio changed, and their Advantage wheels, which I've used forever, they don't sell anymore. They're called Eve wheels now. And I wanted to do a comparison. So I ordered the Eve wheels, and I saw in the catalog, they had another set that's similar called Dedico or Dedeco or something. It's Dedico, I think. Anyway, so I ordered those and I did a comparison. I'll show you that later. And I was going to talk about those. And then I said, I'll just throw in some buffs and I'll just throw in some, well, it turns out this is part one. We're probably going to have several parts. And on most of these wheels, honestly, I could do an entire class, and maybe I will do some on some of them. So burrs are going to be next week. And this week, I'm going to talk to you about buffs and some of the other wheels. So I quickly realized that this is a much more complicated and complex topic than I had originally planned. What I'm going to tell you about is the buffs and burrs and bits and things that I like and that I use. Now, when you go through that catalog, you could easily spend thousands of dollars on those, all kinds of wheels and all kinds of things and all kinds of the offerings out there, and still not know what you've got. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the wheels that you end up loving and what you end up working with and really loving to work with, it has to do with the kind of work that you do, the kind of finishes you like, how much you hate filing, and what kind of scale you work in, and all kinds of other issues. So the things that I love may not be the things that you love. But for those of you who haven't tried a lot of other things, it's a good place to start. One of the things I do recommend is that you choose something, stick with it for a while, and that if it's not meeting your needs, then ask the group, ask somebody. Try to figure out why it's not meeting your needs and what you do to get something that'll meet your needs. Is it not coarse enough, not working fast enough, too messy, whatever. So it doesn't give you the finish you want. So there's a lot of choices out there. So I'm going to show slides right now with Mandrels. Actually, I'm going to start with organization. So one of the things that I do, this is my drawer. This is my top left drawer in my studio. And this is how I keep my things. Now, one of the things that I do is I order a lot of Mandrels. And the reason is that, number one, I don't like the pre-made or the pre-mounted Mandrels. I like the ones that I can screw things off and on. That being said, I don't like to spend a lot of time screwing things off and on. I don't want one mandrel that I have to change every time I want to use something. So I have a lot of them. The reason I don't like the pre-mounted ones is because they're expensive and you end up throwing a lot of them away in short order when the buff gets worn or something happens with that. The reason I have a lot of them is not only because I don't like screwing things off and on, but also because I like to save the wheels that are smaller. So that when, say, a buffing wheel or a silicone wheel or whatever gets really little, it fits into a littler space, right? So I want to save that because sometimes I need a littler one than I've got. And if I have the little one, I save that. If I need a big one, I'll mount another one on there, and that's fine. So what these bins are for is each one has a different polishing compound. So this one back here is rouge. This is Zam. This one is white diamond. This is bobbing compound. This is some of the abrasives. You can see the little scratchy wheels and the little natural fiber wheels. This one has unused wheels, has a center punch, has the screwdrivers that I need. There's extra mandrels down in here, stone wheels back in here, sanding discs back in here, hammer handpiece back here. But you can see that things are organized and easy to reach and everything's in the same place. In other words, all the white diamond is together, all the rouge is together, and that way I know what I've got and where I've got it. This is the silicone wheels that I use mostly. And like I said, they used to be Advantage wheels. Now they call them Eve wheels, but it's the white, black, blue, and pink. The black is the one that I use the most. These are the unused black ones. These are the used black ones. And you can see there's really little ones and there's bigger ones. And there's blue. So the blue is the one, the white is the one I use second most. The blue third, and the pink almost never, but sometimes. So that's just what I use them in. And then notice the wheels. I use this knife edge, and then I use the really wide ones. I will have a list for you that I will post in the Facebook group. I haven't typed it up. I ran out of time yesterday to type it up, so I didn't do that. This is the page from Rio, and I used to order just the cheapest mandrels. I don't anymore. So I don't do the nickel ones. I do the stainless ones only. The other thing is that I have a quick release handpiece. And because I have a quick release handpiece, I have to stick with the 3/32 shank. So all of the shanks in there are 3/32 of an inch. So for me, it's this mandrel, that I use a ton of and that I have in the studio mostly. There's a few others that I use that I wanted to point out to you. There's one that is the one that goes in the 1-inch radial bristle discs. It's M, I believe. I will post that. These two, R and S, are for pin polishers. And then there's the screw-on mandrels. So there's a variety of different ones, but I have to say with the nickel ones, I used to, on a regular basis, snap the screw and I would break them. And I have not broken one with the stainless ever. So
what if you don't have the quick release handpiece on the Fordham?
I would use a size and stick with it. And the reason is, there's the two basic sizes that are the really big one and the really little ones. But if you have some of each, you're constantly changing back and forth. And I don't know about you, but that little key and the everything else just kind of makes me nuts. So, making it bigger and bigger and bigger and then littler and littler and littler, so I would just choose one and stick with it. And I would do the 3/32 just in hopes of having a quick release handpiece someday. Because that's a really easy way to go, and it's a plenty sturdy mandrel, and it works really well. So for years and years, I changed the hand pieces out. I had a flex shaft, and I would pull one hand piece off, and if I needed to drill something, I'd put the number 30 hand piece on. And a girlfriend asked me one time, she said, "Don't you have a second flex shaft?" And I said, "Well, I do. Yeah, it's in a box." And she says, "Well, put it on your bench." And so I did. So now I have 2 flex shafts that hang up. And of the 2 flex shafts, one is the number 30 handpiece and the other one is the quick release handpiece. And the reason I do 2 of them is because this one I can put drill bits of different sizes and different things in. And this one down here all takes the 3/32 mandrels. And having 2 of them just makes it really easy. I also, so the foot pedal for the quick release is on the left and the foot pedal for the number 30 is on the right. And that way I keep them separated and I know which is which. Buffs. I want to talk to you about buffs for a minute. So this is my white diamond compound bucket. You guys have heard me talk about white diamond a lot. And you'll see a lot of different buffs in here. There's felt buffs like this one. There's muslin buffs. Some of them are really little. Some of the muslin buffs are a little bit bigger. This one is a narrower felt buff. This one is a harder one. And then I have little bits of the white diamond itself kind of stacked in here. That's a bigger muslin buff. This is a chamois buff that I use very seldom, if ever. So let me talk to you about felt buffs and muslin buffs. Muslin buffs are really soft. And so if you are If you're polishing something that's maybe a super smooth surface and you want to smooth out any little scratches, cracks, crevices, you should go against the scratches, number one. But using a muslin buff will smooth everything really beautifully. A felt buff is a little bit firmer, and I use a soft felt buff. I don't use the hard felt buffs. The hard ones are almost like using wood. They're really too hard, I think, for most of what I do. So I use what they call the soft ones. And I use them predominantly if I'm using a buffing compound. And I use I will try to use the largest buff I can possibly use for the job. So if I have a buff, say this size right here, and that fits inside the ring that I'm polishing up, that's what I will use. If this is too big to fit inside the ring, I will find one that I have used some, like this one down here, or this one over here that's worn down some, but still fits inside the ring. By using the largest buff that'll fit inside the ring and give me a little bit of room to spare, but that'll fit inside there, what I'm doing is that I'm diminishing the chance of me digging gouges with a buff. If I use a tiny buff inside a ring or inside an area like that, chances of me digging gouges are much better, right? Because I have a tiny buff. So, because I'm buffing only a tiny area. So I tend to use the largest, widest buffs that I can fit into something. And that's why I like the wider ones better. Again, I will put the list of the ones that I prefer up on the Facebook page. For the muslin buffs, I typically use a 1-inch buff. It doesn't take long for them to wear down. I don't like the treated buffs, the ones that are yellow or pink. And the reason I don't like them is because they're much harsher. And you might like that. That might work for you. For me, I want something, if I'm using the muslin, I want something really soft. I want something that's almost like rubbing it with a baby diaper, that's very soft. And so having the untreated ones are good. They do throw crap all over you. You'll look like a porcupine when you finish using one. I recommend a dust mask. We all have masks now. So I recommend wearing a dust mask when you, especially with the muslin buffs, because they tend to throw stuff at you. And I don't use them as often. Like I said, the felt buffs are the ones that I use the most. So the other thing that you will see in here, it's hidden, it's right there. See that little guy? That's a natural bristle buff, or not buff, but a natural bristle wheel. And they come in several flavors. Here's 3 of them. There's actually a 4th one. They come in extra soft, soft, medium, and stiff. This is soft, medium, and stiff. The extra soft, I don't think is worth it. And then there's also some that have the end. I have one that has kind of a cup. There's some that have just the end bristles. You can use these with buffing compound or without buffing compound. These are pre-mounted ones. When I bought these, you couldn't get unmounted ones. You can now. So you can use them with compound, which I do sometimes. These are for getting into really tiny, weird places that it's very difficult to get into any other way. Between prongs, underneath stone settings. If you soldered a bezel onto something and it's got a little bit of a gap between it and say the ring shank or something, these can get into those tiny, tiny places. They also, if you use them without compound, can really clean areas out really nicely. So if you have a buffing compound in some place, say I polished it, I got some buffing compound stuck on the edge of a bezel that I can't get out any other way. I've tried everything I can try. I don't want to scratch up my stone. I can grab one of these, put it on there, and gently get that out of there. And it'll get down into cracks and crevices that other buffs and other things just will not get into. So you can use it with white diamond. You can use it with rouge. I don't use rouge often. And I'm talking about white diamond and rouge because that's what I use. I'm kind of old school. There are a lot of new compounds out there. I've tried some of them. I don't love most of them, but partly that's just habit. That's just what I know. And so I do what I know. And I would recommend that if you've got one that you love, by all means, stick with it. That's great. These are the two that have the end bristles that are really nice. I have probably used mine up. And these are more. They have so many of these. I would shop by price. I don't use these often. I do use them when I do prong settings and stuff to clean things out. So this is the test that I did. The ones on the left are the Eve wheels. The ones in the middle are Advantage wheels, but not the button or the tumbling shot. And the ones on the right are the Dedico wheels. And what I did, and notice I mounted all of them. I kept them separated so I knew which was which. And this is also, Susan sent me Airflex and Eve Flex to give a try. So I gave them a try too. So what I did was to take some strips of brass, and I took a chisel and a little hammer, and I measured off 1-inch segments, and I cut them into 4-inch pieces, and I chiseled them into 1-inch pieces. And then I took each wheel and tested them. On the back of them, I wrote who was who, just so that I wouldn't get mixed up, but I kept them with their boxes, so I knew what I was doing. And then I polished. So here's what I figured out. The Eve and the Advantage, I couldn't tell any difference at all. And I know that looking at this, it's hard for you to tell the difference in these. But if you look at them in person, you actually can tell quite a bit of difference. The Eve and the Advantage were almost the same. The Dedico wheels were much coarser. They felt coarser to the touch, but they also were coarser all the way down. The white one's coarser, the black one, their pink one is probably equivalent to the blue. It was like it's just one step up, the whole thing. So basically while they use the same colors, the coarseness of them is off. And that could be fine. It could be nobody wants the pink one, and that's just great. Here's another one. On the right-hand side, I used the Eve Flex and the Air Flex. And what I found for the Flex wheels was that they were at the same time more aggressive and shinier than the other wheels. So they left a better shine on the metal, but at the same time, they left more gouges. And so it depends again on what you're doing and what you're trying to do with it. But that's just what I found. They left more gouges and a shinier surface. There's also lots of other choices that you have. Oh, I'll talk about this in a minute. There's lots of other choices you have. There's Eve Diapole, Eve Pumice. One of the things with the Eve wheels is they're recommended for between 1 and 5,000 RPM, which is relatively slow. Most of us use these wheels a lot faster than that. The Eve wheels say they can go up to 20,000 RPM, which is the same as the Advantage wheels. Dedico says a maximum speed of 8,000 RPM. And then that's an issue because most of us do use our Flexshafts faster than that. Unless you're only using it partially, you're going to go faster than that. And that's above what Dedico recommends. There's a ton of other ones. I wrote them down. Identa, Bright Boy, Shofu. There's also Kratex. So the Kratex wheels are really old school. That's what I started out using. They are, unless they've changed their formula, they are messy. They're coarse. They're harder to use, I think. The one advantage is they're good up to 25,000 RPM. So if you want to really get after something, they'll do it. They also deteriorate as far as when you're using them, they use up faster and they fling a lot more stuff than the other ones do, and especially than the silicone wheels. So these are fiber wheels. I use these very, very, very seldom. I got these a long time ago. And they go from medium coarse to ultra fine to fine. And, you know, they're good for texturing. They wear out really fast, and they're kind of pricey. So I don't know. They're a nice texture. There's nothing that they do that I can't do by hand. I don't know that I would replace them when I get rid of them. 3M radial bristle discs. So these go from fairly coarse to very, very, very fine. And a lot of people like the really fine ones for finishing. I don't like them for a final finish, and I don't use them for final finish. A lot of people do, and that's great if that's what you want to do. I prefer to finish by hand. But what they do that's really nice is they do a great job of smoothing things. So if you have, say I put a pin back on a piece and I needed to move the catch end, and when I slid it across, I made a snail trail, a slime trail of solder that goes across. I would sand and get that off. But if I want those sanding marks out of there, and if I want to get up really close to where that catch is, to where that final connection is, I would use the 3M radial bristle discs. I pretty much exclusively use the 1-inch ones. And again, it's my theory that, you know, the larger wheels that we use get more work done faster. And so if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get after it and do it. The disadvantage of the larger wheels is, and you can see it in here, is that this center hole is larger than the center hole here. So you can't use these on a standard mandrel. You need a mandrel that has the larger screw size on it. And that's the disadvantage of using the 1-inch ones. The advantage is you get a lot more done a lot faster. I do need to give you a heads up warning, and it's a kind of an interesting thing. I think I bought this kit, this top one, a long time ago. And these right here, peach colored ones, they self-destructed, like not even put them on a mandrel, like just sitting in the box, and you touch them after a couple years and they turn to dust. No other color did that, only those. I think I have a picture. Yeah. And these were the good ones. Some of them just absolutely turned to dust. I think I threw them away, but they just turned to dust. And they fell apart. And I thought that was bizarre. And I've seen other people say something like that. So it's not just me. And they were in their little box and everything. They just, who knows what the deal was with that. I'm showing you Rio stuff. You can get a lot of these from anywhere. You can get other products, other places, and that's great. Rio is the one I'm most familiar with, so that's what I'm showing you. These are, yeah.
Do you stack those 6 at a time?
I use 3 to 5 usually.
Okay.
Not 6 is awfully wide, and I have been known to use 1. Again, if I have to get into a really tiny, tiny, tiny place, I'll use 1 and get into a tiny channel. They recommend using them as multiples. You have to be sure that they're on the right direction. If they're on the wrong direction, you're going to break all their little legs off. It's going to be very bad. In no time at all, you will destroy them. So be sure they're on the right direction so that you don't break their little legs off.
Deb, I had seen one that they put one way, then the next one was the opposite way, and then the final one was the one you had done on the first wheel. Is that, I couldn't figure out why they suggested that.
I can't either. That doesn't make any sense to me, because if you've ever run them backwards or put them on backwards, you will see that their little legs just break off in no time at all, and they don't do as much polish. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there was a reason, but it's not something I know of. So these are called pin polishers, and Rio sells them. They come in 3mm and 2mm size. And the nice thing about them is there's different ends that you can get here, right here. This one, and this one. And you can get coarse, medium, fine, extra fine. And you just chuck them up in here. You can also shape the ends. So if I need something that's a little bit rounded to get down into something, I can do that. If I need something that's flat, last week when I was using the 3mm, setting the 3mm stones, I used this one and I flattened the end of it to get down inside the bezel, to clean out inside the bezel really well, because I had no other way to get down in there really well. I don't use these often, but for cleaning tiny, tiny, tiny areas, they're excellent. They work really well for that. And this again is how I keep them, so that I have them separated. Again, I don't love changing out the mandrels, so I bought different, one mandrel for each color, so that I've got them. I've got the 3mm here, the 2mm over here, and then I can just keep them separated, and I know what I've got and where I've got it.
Deb?
Yeah.
Have you ever tried the Advantage pin polishers?
I haven't. Mm-mm.
They're ridiculously expensive, but it seems like they could be good. I don't
They
know.
could be. They could be. And I really like the Advantage. Well, I liked the Advantage stuff, so probably they're Eve polishers now. But I really like that series of polishers and grinders, and that. So I may give those a try. We'll see. So this is, again, things that I don't use very often. I know a lot of people do. These are the snap-on sanding discs, and you can snap them. You can use them frontwards. You can use them backwards. Again, you need a special mandrel for these because they just snap on and off. But they're nice for polishing around things, cleaning up surfaces. I do most of this by hand, probably because I'm just old school and it is who I am, and that's that. Oh, these are the fiber wheels that I told you about earlier. So separating discs and stone wheels. And I will throw in here the diamond grinding wheels. These are predominantly grinding tools, and I don't use them a lot on metal, sometimes, but not a lot. The stone wheels tend to load up with the metals that we have. The metals that we work with are so soft that they tend to load the wheels up and not work as efficiently as they could. What I do use these for is for grinding on other things like stones. And that's especially for the stones and the diamond wheels, and maybe the wider of the separating discs. And so I will use them for grinding on found object stones, things I want to take down, occasionally on metal, but really not often at all. Separating discs, on the other hand, I use a lot, and I have a lot of different ones. If you'll look at this, I have large ones, small ones. These are much thinner than these. I have really thick ones right here. These are ultra thin ones. I have, these are, can you see that these are cupped? I have lots of separating discs, and I use them a lot. I will use them to cut grooves. I will use them to clean up solder joints. I will use them to sometimes cut seats for stones. I will use them to clean out interiors of bezels. I use them for all sorts of things. And it's another one, if you'll look at this, see, I have several of these. That's because this one is fairly new. This one is fairly small. And same here. See how this one is small? That's because it's been used some. So it's back here and it's small. I have other ones ready to go. Here's another really small one. And I save those small ones because when I need to get into a small area, they are there for me. So,
yeah, what are the cup ones used for?
Getting into rounded spaces. And I can use them cupped up or cupped down, either way, to grind curves.
Oh, so you could use those to clear out solder from inside a larger bezel, maybe.
Uh-huh, absolutely. And the tiny ones I can get into even relatively small bezels. Yeah. I also use them a lot when if I have a T-joint that I need to clean up. I will take my separating disc, and I use the thin ones. I'll take my separating disc and I will just whip it down that T-joint. And if you hold it at a 45-degree angle to the T-joint, You won't touch either piece of metal. You will only touch the solder. And it takes some practice, and cleans it up in no time at all. Cleans it up really fast.
Deb, how do you avoid you marring things with the screw? Like in-
Because I'm holding it at a 45-degree angle. You have to watch the screw. You really do. You're right, because if you hold it up too high, that screw is going to hit something and then you're in trouble. So you need to be really careful at the angle you're holding. You need to watch what's going on very, very carefully. And that's it. I just watch it.
You should tell people, like when I started taking from you and you told me to get stainless steel screws, and I did, the stainless steel spindles, whatever you call them, have lower profile screws than the nickel ones.
Oh, do they? I didn't even know that.
Or at least the ones that I had before. They come in different profiles if you look at the pictures in the book.
Interesting. Interesting. I would believe that, because the nickel has to be a little bit bigger because it's not as strong. And so that's another real advantage. I didn't even realize that. I've used the stainless for so many years now, to the exclusion of everything else, that I probably knew that at one point and forgot it. But that might help too, Diane, is the lower profile head on the screw. So
Can you buy replacement screws and the little washers? Can you buy them separately?
I don't think so. I save the screws when I bend a mandrel or do something like that. I have some of the spare screws. The washers I mostly throw out for the most part. I only use the little washers if I have something really hard that I'm putting on the mandrel. So something like a separating disc, a stone wheel, I will use right there, I'll use the little washer on that. But if I'm using a silicone wheel or a buff, I just get rid of the washer, and I just have if we go back to that first one, the little compartment that I keep the screwdrivers and that in, I dump it in there. And in the bottom of that, it's just a wash with extra screws and extra little washers. And over time, you'll just collect them. And then if I need one, I've got it.
I drop the screws and lose them.
Yeah. I don't know of them being sold separately at all.
You could probably get those at Marshall Hardware off of Miramar Road.
Yeah, take a sample in, because I don't even know what threads they are.
Wonder
Good
if
idea.
washers that we use with the reactive metal screws, remember that they come in brass and the gold color?
Yeah, but that doesn't cushion anything, Diane. So what we're buying with the little cardboard washers on these is that they're a little bit squishy. And so by using them with something hard, we're able to tighten that screw more. If you've ever tried to put a separating disc on without the washer, your chances of breaking it go up radically. So you want that washer in there, especially for the separating discs, the thin ones especially. I use them for the stone ones because they keep them from spinning as badly, and they enable you to tighten that screw up tighter. You can use them without. I see one right here. That one doesn't.
Deb, didn't we have those metal washers that we used when we used that class that you taught at Idlewild, where we had the multiple separating discs all lined up? Didn't we have metal washers there?
Because we were using them as spacers, not as cushion for the screw. There's still the cardboard one on either end. And it doesn't matter whether it's on the back or the front side. It doesn't make any difference. You just should have it on one side. But the metal ones are spacers. We were using as spacers, not as cushioning washers. So the diamond wheels, I don't think, oh, this is a close-up of some of the stone wheels that I have. And you can see different, where I've worn them down some. Some of them this one has a little brass insert in it. I think it's a Mizzy wheel. So with stone wheels and separating discs and diamond wheels, the main thing that I use them for, or one of the main things I use them for, is making some tools. These are matting tools. Question?
On the stone wheels, do they come in different grips?
They do. So these stone wheels, these pink ones are relatively fine. These, and they came with, I think they came with a Dremel tool. This one you can see is coarser than this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mizzy is a brand name. It's also a heatless wheel. They call them heatless because the wheels don't heat up, not because the metal doesn't heat up. The metal heats up a
Yeah.
lot. But you can see there's different grits and different whatever. The Mizzy wheels are one of my favorites.
I was just thinking in terms of if you have a stone that you want to have a shine to, you know, to be able to get higher and higher.
Yeah, this is not for doing something you want to shine on. These are grinding for removing material. This is when you made a bezel and you soldered it on and you go to put the stone in and it doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah.
And you look at that stone and you go, are you kidding me? I have 6 hours in on this bezel and you are not fitting in there. And so you need to take and you need to grind off one area, right?
Yeah.
And so what you're going to do is that you take this, and often you need to use it with water because you want to be really careful with your stone. You need to be sure you're doing it below bezel level so that it won't be visible because it's going to be ugly. But you can grind off enough to get it to fit in that bezel. Okay, so this is a grinding tool, and so are most of the diamond ones. Now, the stone ones, you can use with lubricant or without. You can use them wet or dry, basically. The diamond ones you must use with lubricant. If you don't, they're going to heat up and all their little diamonds are going to fall off.
Right.
So the diamond ones you have to use with a lubricant of some sort. You can use it with, you can do burr life with them. Usually with diamond ones, what we do is use them underwater or with water, where we're dipping them in water regularly.
Well, whenever you do stone, you should always use water.
Right, because you don't want to breathe the dust.
Right.
Right, because the dust is bad.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're grinding other, well, and the stone gives, the stone wheels themselves give off enough dust that you don't want to breathe that either. But using, a lot of times I don't use water, but I'll use a mask. So, but you should use something. You shouldn't be breathing that dust. It's not good. So separating disc stone wheels and diamond wheels, I use a lot for making tools. These are matting tools that I made recently. These are just punches from Harbor Freight. The top one was made with a diamond wheel, or diamond, I think it was a ball burr diamond. And the bottom one was made with a separating disc. And texture hammers also I make with those. So that is the end of the slides. So I'll talk to you again. All right, so there's a few other things that I use occasionally, but not often, that I wanted to tell you about. One of them is the mandrel that has the little slit in it that you put sandpaper in. It makes it into a flap wheel. I know Ann Wolf uses that one a lot for the interior of her rings. I have never used that one a lot. And like I said, it will depend on what you build and what you make and that kind of thing as to how much you use different tools. So for what she makes, it makes a lot of sense. She's got a lot of rings where the interior needs to be smooth, to have that nice comfort fit. When I have that, I typically will use a silicone wheel, but my rings are not even like hers. Mine are much more, they're heat textured, they're irregular bands, they're, so I need a different look and I need a different tool. So the flap wheel can be really beneficial, and you can put different sandpapers in there, different grits. So another one that I do use rarely, but occasionally, is if I'm trying to get into a place and it's just tight, 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 I will take a toothpick, break it in half, chuck up the big end into my flex shaft, and use the tiny end as something that's similar to, but not the same as, a hard felt buff. You can charge it with the white diamond or rouge, and you can get in there and buff like in between prongs in a tiny, tiny stone setting. You can buff in between there with a toothpick. You can also take a small piece of steel wool, wind it on the end of the toothpick so it's like a steel wool Q-tip, and polish with that if you want a more satin finish. So these are the things that I predominantly use. like I said, there are hundreds of things out there. There are so many that I didn't even talk about. And you may have different needs than what I have, but this is what works for me. So I thought I'd share that with you. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Susan.
When you showed your picture with the drawer of little purple containers, there was a purple container with bobbing compound. That's the first time I've heard you use that word, ever.
Yeah, ever. So bobbing compound is, it's one that I learned to use when I first learned jewelry making with Val Link. And bobbing compound is more aggressive than white diamond. It's typically used when we've done hollowware, when we've made hollowware, we've raised a piece, we've done the planishing. And after planishing, you want something to kind of smooth everything up. So it's a more aggressive compound, does not leave a high polish. It leaves much more of a satin finish. I don't use it often anymore. I pretty much go from a 400 sandpaper straight to white diamond. But a bobbing compound it's just more aggressive. It's very similar to white diamond as far as the way you would use it, but it's just more aggressive.
So you wouldn't use that like as a precursor to white diamond to avoid more sanding?
You could. You absolutely could.
Yeah. I hate sanding.
If you really hate sanding, it's a possibility. It's like I said, it's just a more aggressive polish. So it will remove deeper scratches faster. So I don't mind the sanding. And so I just go through the sanding grits pretty quickly. But if you really hate sanding, it's a good alternative. ZAM works for a lot of people. ZAM is a little bit in between. ZAM is, it's kind of like the flex wheels. It's more aggressive and shinier. I just have never grown to love it, but I know a lot of people who use it and do love it. But again, I mean, I've got those in the drawer. ZAM, the thing I keep ZAM for, the only reason I keep ZAM around is if I scratch a soft stone, because ZAM will clean up a stone really, really well. Bobbing compound actually will too. White diamond, only really soft stones. It won't clean up anything that's very hard. So I keep those around for that. But again, I think that a lot of times we get caught up in trying anything that anybody has out there to offer. And what I would recommend is that you do some research, do some studying, figure out what you want to use, buy that, try it, work with it for a while, and then see if it's meeting your needs. And if it's not, figure out what's not meeting your needs. Is it not coarse enough? Is it not fine enough? Is it too slow? Is it too fast? Is it too messy? And whatever it is, then say, put it out on the Facebook group, put it out somewhere else, put it out in Ganoxen, put it out somewhere and say, listen, there's tons of jewelry making groups on Facebook, and some of the stuff they say is right. So, but you can put it out there and say, I've been using compound X and I don't like it because, what would you recommend? And then go with something else, and that's fine. But I think what happens when we get too many choices is that we get lost and you don't know what to use. So I would say limit your choices a little bit and see if it'll meet your needs. And if not, talk to me. Sometimes I can tell you other ones, even if I don't use them, I can tell you about them. Sometimes I can't.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I thought it was interesting. I texted or Instagram messaged Nicole Ringgold because I'm such a fan of her stuff, and she's always responds and said she liver sulfurs and then uses fiber wheels on everything. That was interesting.
Does she charge the fiber wheels with something?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you don't have to.
I like the finish of the fiber wheels, and she showed me the ones that you can mount. They're not pre-mounted.
Right, they have those now. When I bought mine, they didn't have those, but now I saw in the catalog, they've got ones you can mount, so that you don't have to buy them pre-mounted.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, do you know which one she uses as far as the coarseness?
She sent me the link. I can
Mhm.
post it. She sent me the link. I'll have to look.
Okay. Anything else? Other questions? Anything? I do want to welcome, there's a whole cadre of new people today. So I wanted to welcome you and also let you know that I was not leaving anybody out on purpose. What I was doing was trying to get my footing and get professional enough where I felt like I could include more people. So welcome to the group. And I think that we are getting better. Today there were some interruptions, but that's how life goes. So I'm just trying to do this to kind of keep us all together and keep us going. I know it's a hard time for a lot of us. So it's I think it's a good way for us to stick together, to get to know each other a little bit. It's also been, there's some things that I really like about the online. One of them is that I can work with people like Leslie, who lives in Oregon, and Joanne, who lives in Idaho, that normally I would not get to work with very often, if ever anymore. And so I'm really enjoying that. I also enjoy, I've got some videos coming up. I've got one I'm working on that's a longer piece. It's basically start to finish of me building a piece. And I'm not finished yet, so it's not finished yet. But I'm working on that, and it's a point of view and a looking at it that I don't think I could ever do in a classroom. So there are some things that I think we can do online if we get a little bit creative with it. Ultimately, I will be going to putting up a paywall for this, but probably not until the COVID thing is over, which may be, who knows when, forever, I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, any more questions before we go on to our studio tour? All right. Thank you so much for joining me today for this session of Studio Time with Deb, the online version. And I will see you next week. Next week, we will talk about burrs because there was so much information this week, I couldn't include it all. So we'll talk about burrs next week. See you then.